Hello and welcome everyone. This is Rashmi from Designhill and your host for the day. First of all, wishing you all a very happy new year. Hope you had a great time with your friends and families. I would like to welcome you to this session wherein we are going to talk about branding mastery, agile strategies to stand out as a brand. We have super talented panelists with us here today who will be sharing some insightful tips and strategies with you. So make sure you stay with us till the end. The event is brought to you by Designhill, which is the world's leading creative marketplace that caters to the creative needs of businesses and individuals alike who can source high quality designs and buy unique products created by independent artists. Moving ahead, let me introduce our speakers for the day. To start with, we have Lisa Hastings. Lisa is a creative director and brand strategist. With 20 years of brand and agency experience, she has worked with brands, businesses, and individuals across USA and Europe. She has recently taken up the creative director global role with SGK Australia. Lisa, can you would you like to go ahead and say hi to the audience?
Hi everyone, thanks for joining. It is crazy hour in Australia where I am, but thanks for joining us. I'm looking forward to being part of it.
Wonderful. Moving ahead, we have Matt Davis with us. Matt is a solo brand and culture consultant. He helps business leaders align around powerful brand strategies, which inspires more meaningful customer and employee experience. He has over 18 years of experience working with businesses of all shapes and sizes, from startup through to household names like Nestle, Capital One, Boot, Nikon, etc. Matt.
Hi everyone, it's great to be here from the UK. Lovely to. I'm glad it's not 2:00 in the morning, so I'm glad for the UK people. But it's such an honour to be amongst such esteemed guests. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. It's 9 p.m. here in India, though. Okay. Next we have is Philip Van Dusen. Philip is a creative entrepreneur and owner of Verhal Brand Design, which is a branding agency based in New Jersey. As a thought leader, Philip shares his expertise in marketing, design, and entrepreneurship on YouTube to his 200,000 subscribers, in his brand newsletter, and on the Brand Design Masters podcast, and in his Brand Design Master Facebook community. In his career, Philip has led creative teams on both the client side and agency side of the street, serving as a VP of design for PepsiCo and Old Navy and executive creative director at the iconic branding firm Lender Associate. Philip. You gotta unmute yourself.
Trying to. There we go. Finally, wasn't doing it. Thank you. I appreciate the invitation to be here. I'm really excited for Designhill to be putting on this conference, and I'm excited to be on this panel with these other esteemed branding industry experts. So welcome, everybody.
All right. Next we have is Sunny Bonnell. Sunny is an award-winning CEO and co-founder of Moto, one of the top leadership and branding consultancies, and author of the groundbreaking business book Rare Breed. She can let us know more about the book though at the end. Having named one of the GD USA's top 25 people to watch, Sunny has an unconventional approach to building standout brands. Sunny has worked with the world's most visionary leaders and ambitious companies to break the status quo, including Google, Microsoft, Hershey's, USA Today, and 20th Century Fox. Sunny.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I love this bunch of hooligans that we have on the panel today, and just excited to talk about brand and brand strategy with everyone.
All right, last but not the least, we have Steph Hammerlink. Steph is a designer turned strategist. He works as a freelance brand specialist with variety of international clients in the FMCG space. His podcast called Let's Call Branding is an exploration of all things brands. It features weekly interviews with industry leaders such as Brand Sharp, Philip Barden, and many more experts, and has become a staple for brand builders. Steph has an outspoken voice in the branding industry, with appearance on Chris Too's The Future, Just Branding, and many more. Steph.
Hey everyone, Just Branding's actually Matt's podcast, so go check that out. I hope we can do some cool stuff today. Happy to be here.
So first of all, I would like to thank all the panelists for taking out the time and joining us here today, and all the audience once again for joining us. It's a great way to start a new year, by learning agile strategies to build a brand. So welcome everybody once again. Here's a quick update for everyone. You can take the screenshot of this event and tweet about it. You can use hashtag Designhill events and tag Designhill DH and all our panelists who are here today. And the social handles, Twitter handles of the panelists will be in the chat section. And one lucky winner will have a chance to win a $50 print shop gift card. So that would be fun. So please do that. Also, we would be providing certificates to all the attendees who will stick to us till the end. So make sure you do that. All right. So that's with the announcements. Before we start the session, let's quickly look at what Designhill is all about.
Looking to get your boss to remember your name? Head to the world's #1 creative marketplace, Designhill.
When my company promoted me to head up our latest real estate development project, I was excited, then anxious, then petrified. How was I going to hire the team, get the designs completed, and design beautiful presentation materials on our lean budget while impressing my bosses, some of whom are still learning my name?
Good job, Mitch.
My name's Lawrence. That's why I went to Designhill and got the design help I needed that fit within my company's brand guidelines. The process was simple. Designhill's design contest ensured I'd get a ton of results I'd love. Start by picking a number of designs that inspire you. This one's good, and that one. This one speaks to me. Then share some information about the project. Lastly, pick a package that fits your budget. Do you just want a logo, or do you want it all? Then, boom. I got more than 60 custom design options to choose from, as well as all the other graphic design assets I wanted. And it's all backed by Designhill's 100% money-back guarantee. If I don't find a design I like, I get my money back. You can't lose. Now I have what I need to make a splash at my meetings, with everything from business cards, pamphlets, posters, and more. It's real.
Let the world know it's real and build your brand with Designhill.
All right, that was about Designhill, and now we are all set to start the session. If you have any question, make sure you put your questions in the question section, and in the last 15 minutes, we will take all your questions. Also, we will be rolling out few polls in between, so make sure you answer to those polls as well. So let's begin, and let's start with the basic. Guys, so the term branding, which people use it interchangeably with logo design, identity design, etc. Let's get into the depth of it. Let's start with what actually branding is and what it isn't. So let me start with Sunny first, and then I will take the same question to the other panelists as well to sort of add on their opinions. So Sunny, please throw some light on what actually branding is and what it isn't, which people confuse it with.
Yeah. So brand. Can we hear me? Okay. I didn't know if I was on mute. So brand is really, the way I define it, is kind of the emotional space that your offering holds within your audience's mind. A lot of leaders and organizations believe that brand belongs to the marketing department. They associate it with a logo, some fonts, colors, etc. But really what brand is the entire experience. It's all of those elements working together to form kind of the idea or image or impression that your audience has. It is not just a logo. It is not just a graphic element. It is all of those working collectively in an effort to sort of help your audience understand who you are, what you stand for, what you believe, and what exactly the offering is that you have for them to connect with.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sunny. Matt, I would like to take the same question to you. What would you like to say? What actually brand is, which people, take it otherwise or think it otherwise? So how do you want to explain what branding is?
Yeah, well, like Sunny, I don't believe it's a logo and some fonts. I kind of believe that branding has a bit of an identity crisis in a weird and rather ironic kind of way, because there's so many terms that fly around that really need defining. So the way that I define brand is that it's the meaning that people attach to you and your offer. So it doesn't belong to you, it belongs to them. It's in their hearts and their minds. And Branding is the noble attempt to manage that meaning. So that's how I see it, and that's how I talk about it. And of course, logo design and graphic design is a part of how we manage the meaning, but it is only a small part of the wider sort of remit of brand.
All right. Moving forward, Steph, let me take this question to you, and then I'll come to Lisa as well with the same question. Today, we are talking about building an agile branding strategy. So, Steph, please throw some light on why having an agile branding strategy is important, and how does it help businesses in today's time?
Sure. I mean, I thought about this question, and I think first, maybe for me, what agile really means, because it brings with it like a whole slew of like associations. And I think if I see agile as just being very adaptable, able to move quickly and easily, I think that's, in that case, agile branding is just a case of having a feedback loop and making sure you iterate on the brand, and you don't just keep something static. You make sure you adapt to what's happening in the market and the consumers. And so I guess that's very important to do. But there is, of course, this friction with what we call like the typical brand strategy, which is defining your essence and all that stuff, where it is like that's based on consistency, while agile branding is a little bit more based on emergent strategy, which is like looking at what's happening out there and making sure that you adapt in time. And I think having a strategy for that is just making sure that you as a company are open for feedback and can adapt when you need to, and aren't just dug into the ground with what your brand is and stick to that. Because in reality, a brand is something very dynamic that really exists in that interaction with the market and the consumer. And so you need to be able to adapt to that. I hope that's somewhat of an answer.
All right, I'll take the same question to Lisa as well. Lisa, please throw some light on why having a branding strategy is a must-have in today's time, and how does it help businesses?
I think it's really important to kind of define what a strategy is, and I think it's definitely been worked up to something over time that it doesn't really need to be, because quite simply put, and I talk to this, so I've always come from a strategic design background, and there's designers that think they can't do strategy, and strategists who kind of think designers are just the people who make it look pretty. And I think it's really important to say, look, strategy is in essence just a plan for a brand. So it's kind of defining those goals, those goalposts, and where you want to get to, and then where you sit and live in the world, and kind of working out the pillars to get there. And in terms of the agile tag, really that's just kind of essential in today's world because it's moving so fast. So it's just moving through all of those pillars and working out kind of quicker points to get you to where you need to be, adapting them and evolving them along the way. So for me, kind of the agile part is really just a modern term for strategy. Like, I don't think there's any strategy that needs to be long-winded necessarily now.
All right. So the next question that I have for you is a lot of people have this question, and most of them who registered for this webinar asked this question, which is about where to start developing a brand strategy. Businesses figure out that having a strategy is important, and it is important at least in today's time. But the question that arises is that how to go about it, what should be the starting point, and what are the must-have questions that businesses should ask themselves before building one. So Philip, let me take this question to you, and then I'll take it to Sunny.
Sure. Well, I think the first thing that a company should do is hire a brand strategy expert. The truth, a lot of companies try to do it on their own, and one of the problems with that is that they don't have the experience or the insights or the understanding of the breadth of approaches that you can have in developing brand strategy, and also an understanding of the competitive marketplace when it comes to the other competitors in your particular category or your space. So I think that when you're just starting off with brand strategy, the best thing to do is get the advice of an expert. But the basics of strategy all come down to the problem, right? So you really have to start with what is the problem that you're solving, who you're going to solve it for, why you're better, why you're different, what you're offering. Those are the real important tenets of branding. And then I think one of the most important things about branding these days, anyway, when we talk about agile branding, is differentiation, because I think that one of the things a lot of companies don't pay enough attention to is the competitive landscape. Because the market is moving so fast, as Lisa said, the competition is not a static landscape. The competition is always moving, always adjusting, always iterating, always evolving. And you as a brand have to do the same thing. So understanding the competitive landscape and what is going on there in terms of pricing, in terms of, premium offerings, in terms of services, in terms of, the visual brand ecosystems, the marketing approaches that people are taking, is all really critical in developing your branding. And starting off with an understanding of the competition, I think, is one of those foundational elements that a lot of times when companies are starting to think about strategy on their own, they kind of short sheet, or they don't give as much attention as they should.
All right. Philip, you also talked about considering the pricing element to it and considering the competition that's there in the market. Can you also throw some light on it? Like how important, what factors people should consider when it comes to pricing and competition, when it comes to branding?
I'm not sure I understand the question. When it comes to the cost of branding?
Yeah. So when it comes to, is pricing and competition one of the factors that people should consider when they are devising the overall brand strategy for themselves?
Yes, of course. I mean, I think pricing structure and whether you are a value brand or a premium brand is probably one of the most basic things that you have to look at when you're going out into market as a brand. There are a myriad different parameters that you need to look at and map your competition against. It could be, depending on the category that you're in, whether you are very consumer centric, whether you are very, classical and or whether you're super contemporary, or whether you're very design based, or whether you're based in, some sort of, emotional tenet. How your brand positions itself is possible to look at across, as many parameters as there are. So what's really important is that you pay attention to what those considerations are in your category. They're important to, and what your competitors are operating on, because if they're operating on those aspects of their positioning in the market, you have to look at those same things and make very conscious choices about where you're going to play. So you can either follow the crowd to go with that kind of energy and weight that the crowd is carrying, or to differentiate yourself drastically and go into a more, kind of unusual space.
All right. So let's take more opinion on that question, considering a lot of people had this question. Sunny, I'll take the same question to you. And please help the audience understand where should they begin with when it comes to creating a brand strategy for themselves.
Yeah, well, there's, 3 or 4, in my opinion, really pivotal questions that you have to ask. Number one, you have to start with leadership. You have to make sure that there's clarity of purpose. Why are we doing this, right? What is our purpose? What are we sort of getting up to go to battle every day for? The second thing to ask is who are we speaking to? Philip touched on this a little bit, but who are we speaking to? Why should anyone care? Number 3, which is really big for motto specifically, and why we named our company this, is what is that war cry? What is our motto? What is the hill that we're sort of marching towards? And what is the flag that we're carrying? Why should our team, our audience really care about what we're doing? What cause are we really fighting for? That's so critical to understand when you're building any brand, is to know why this world needs what you have to offer. And then one of the most important things that we ask, and what we wrote our book about, and we go deep on this in our book. You'd mentioned it earlier when you were talking about my bio, but my partner Ashley and I wrote a book called Rare Breed: A Guide to Success for the Defiant, Dangerous, and Different. And that is all about identity. It's about what is your identity in the marketplace. So we're pioneering this kind of new leadership thinking, which is how can teams and organizations not only think like a one of a kind, but how can they really bring their identity forward into the market in such a way that they're really able to defy the ordinary. They're able to create an offering that is unlike anyone out there, and they're able to brand it in such a way that is truly ownable to them. So it's not only just about thinking like a rare breed, but it's also about who you hire, who you bring on in the brand statements, and what that brand promise is going to be. And that really identity of what your organization is is so critical. And so you have to think like a rare breed. And many organizations don't. If I had $1 for every company that calls me and says something like, I want to be the next Warby Parker, the question that you have to ask them is, how do you be the next you? And what does the next you actually look like? And how can you truly own that? Because even if you are in a competitive space, there is one thing that no one else has, which is your leadership, your team, your culture. That is your true differentiator. And if you're able to actually codify that and then bring it to life through your offering, it makes it a lot easier to have that conversation, because then you're not another Me Too brand. You're truly your own. You're able to plant that flag. You're able to set that tone. So for us, we look at two parts. We look at purpose and we look at identity. And without either one of those things working together, you cannot establish anything in the market, because number one, you have only something to sell, not something to say. So we encourage all of our clients or people who are starting brands to think about that. And I think Lisa touched on this as well, which is, what substance do you have and how do you bring that to the market in a way that people begin to care about it and they become loyal to it and they celebrate it.
Amazing. So here are some amazing insights coming from our panelists, and I hope the audience who all are listening to this are taking notes. And if you have any question, make sure you put those questions in the question section and we will not miss them at the end. All right, so next question, Matt, I will take this question to you, and it is about niching down, right? So how important creating a niche is when it comes to branding?
So was that niche, when you create a niche and positioning yourself in a niche, just so I understand the question?
Yeah.
Well, it depends on your strategy, right? It depends what you're looking to do. So, really for me, when you look at the strategy, as Lisa says, it's definitely a plan. As Philip said, it's definitely a problem that you're looking to solve. You've got to ask yourself a number of questions. You've got to ask yourself, why do we exist beyond making money? Like, really, what are we trying to do here? You've got to ask, who do we serve and why should they choose us? You've got to ask, how are we going to show up for those people in a relevant way? And you've also got to ask kind of like, well, what are we actually offering them ultimately? What business are we in? Now, they sound like super easy questions, super kind of clear questions, but I would say you can't really do branding and manage the meaning unless you define it at least in some way in answering those questions as a leadership team internally within the organization. Once you understand that, you can look at how you express that externally, and you can think about things like the niche, your proposition, where you want to position yourself. Some brands are happy to be mass market. Some brands are happy to kind of be all encompassing and compete on price, and that's up to them. But frankly, I think really where we're going is that in the globalized community that we've got, niching is an important strategy that every brand needs to think about, particularly startups. Why should somebody choose you over maybe a more established brand? And you need to have a niche answer for that. And the only way you can really understand that is if you really get to grips with your audience. As Steph said earlier, that's a key component of this buzzword agile, having that feedback loop, making sure you design it into the routines of your business. So you're constantly checking in on what customers are saying about the experiences that you're providing for them. That's absolutely crucial. So I don't know if that goes far enough, but that's kind of my initial take. I'm sure other people have some other thoughts on that.
Sure. Let me take the same question to Lisa as well. Lisa, please throw some light on this, how important niching down is and how does it help businesses when it comes to branding?
I think, like Matt says, it's very much about understanding who you're trying to appeal to, and also going back to, because brand sits on different levels. So you might be a brand who's a product or a service, but even down to your personal brand, you need to look at kind of your own core values are a really good thing to kind of dip into and understand. Kind of, I'm very much about kind of bravery and risk, and taking kind of brave brands that kind of really excite me, but that's not for everyone. So I think it's also about going back to what you stand for and what you believe in, not just niching down and hitting a target market because it's there. It's actually which target market do you go for that actually still resonates with you. So I think, like Matt says, there are different levels of niche, and it comes from before that. You need to discover why you exist and what your purpose is in the world, and kind of the people that you're trying to serve.
All right. So, Sunny, there's a follow-up question asked by Roxanne in the chat section, and the question is the leadership approach that you spoke on. Is it the same as being a thought leader as a brand?
Yes, you can absolutely channel what your identity is, depending on if you're talking about it from a leadership standpoint. If you, let's say you're the CEO of this brand and you're the visionary behind the brand and you are sort of the embodiment of this rare breed quality, you can absolutely use that to sort of act as a megaphone to make sure that those things should align. Whatever you're sort of driving out through your company is oftentimes what you will likely be embodying out into the real world as well. So very much like if you look at the way that Ashley and I talk about motto and we talk about rare breed, they're very much in line with the purpose of our company, the vision of our company, the identity of our company. And when you hear us speak and you hear us out in the world talking about the book, talking about our framework, doing workshops, all those things are very aligned. They're not isolated from one another, if that makes sense. So absolutely, you can use that viewpoint to drive your identity even more. As a matter of fact, you should be talking about what you believe in, what you're about, so that people can resonate with it and connect with it. And if those two things can align, it makes the conversation much easier, because then you're not creating conflict by preaching one thing. You're not delivering one sermon, right? And then you're doing something completely different within your company. You sometimes would love to see those two things align. It makes your ability to connect much easier, because you have a same sort of point of view all the way through.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sunny. All right. So, Steph, this question is for you. And the question is, how important a logo or a slogan or a vision or mission of a company is when it comes to branding? And what are the key parameters that businesses should keep in mind before finalizing it?
Okay, just before I dive into that, I wanted to say something about niching, because I do feel
Sure.
like this word is thrown around a lot in the industry, and I think there's a bit of a problem with a lot of people like creating an artificial niche because they heard somewhere they need to niche down, and they just start thinking like, I'm gonna do logo design for, I don't know, pet owners or whatever, and sometimes I feel like I think you should start with doing your service and maybe like don't have such a well-defined niche, and just do it and see how you interact with the market. And only after years of that experience, or at least some time, you can start to really see where you're good at and what's matching with the market. And once that clicks, you can start communicating and building a brand around that. But just don't make the mistake of like creating an artificial niche just because you've heard that before. I think that's a bit of a problem. But just that side note. On the logo, well, I mean, a logo on its own is like, on one hand, you could say it's very important in terms of like just brand identity. It's something where a lot of other elements revolve around. On the other hand, you could say like consumers really don't care about your logo all that much. But there's something in between. For me, a logo is important in terms of like, it's an anchor, it's a visual anchor, it's an identifier. So when people walk through the street or in store, they look at the shelf. Sometimes it's the logo that makes people recognize you and pick you. So it is important, but in the grand scheme of things, of course, it's not like the biggest thing. But if you would like point out two things, because that was also the question, like what do we need to look out for when doing a logo? I think two factors are important: readability, and I'm not just saying in terms of like the name, but do people understand the logo in terms of like, can they read it? Can they somewhat get an idea of at least in what direction is it? Like if it's a logo for a shoe company, it shouldn't look like a logo for I don't know, bakery or something. Like there needs to be some kind of vibe around it that works. So that's what I mean with readability. And then distinctiveness is, does it look different from the competition? Can you separate it easily from afar? Is it color something that works, that makes it look different from competition? I think that's very important when you are designing a logo.
All right. So, Philip, let me take this question to you, and it is about a lot of people. Since the topic says, strategies to stand out as a brand, a lot of questions came around the same topic, which is about what makes a brand stand out. And if you can also share some real-time examples of the brands which are, doing things which is making them stand out, that would be sort of very helpful for the audience to understand. So Sunny touched upon this a little bit, and we will take this to Matt also post this. So can you throw some light on what makes a brand stand out and what are the elements of it?
Sure. I think one of the things that new brands have a tendency to do is they, in many cases, play it safe. And I think, as I mentioned before, brand differentiation is probably the most important thing to any brand. There's a saying, a lot of people have claimed to say it the first time, but different is better than better. And in many cases, I think that's true. One of the things that lots of brands have a tendency to do when they come out of the gate is to play it safe, or they don't want to upset anybody. And I think that is one of the most dangerous things for brands to do. I think that Lisa, kind of alluded to this a little bit, in that I think brands really need to have guts. They need to be bold. They need to take a stand. And I think that links into what Steph was saying a little bit in terms of differentiation and sorry, I'm like totally stumbling over myself. I think there's a saying that I like to say, which is that if you stand in the middle of the road, you're going to get run over, because there's so much noise out there now. There's so much competition. Everyone has a platform to stand on, and there's 10 million platforms to stand on. I think that you have to make a stand, look distinctive, and carve out a place for yourself. Marty Neumeier was on my podcast, Brand Design Masters podcast, a few episodes ago, and he was talking about when he started off doing packaging in Silicon Valley, and he luckily landed some of Apple's first packaging projects. And he did obviously a killer job with those because it made a name for his agency. But when it came to niching down, he came to be known as the agency to go for software packaging. But when I asked him about that idea of niching down, he said, you never want to niche down and say, I'm only going to accept jobs around software packaging. He would take any job that came to his agency because his agency had gotten so successful. He was getting a lot of traffic. A lot of people wanted them to work on their brands, and he wouldn't turn down anybody, even though he was known to be the expert in software packaging and, very famous because of what he'd done for Apple. He just didn't put that other work, that non-software packaging work, in his portfolio. They didn't put it on their website. They didn't publish it in any way, but they did it. They wanted to keep their agency doors open. They wanted to grow. They wanted to make more revenue. So they stood out as, the experts in that one particular niche. But when it came to closing the doors on other options, they didn't do that. So I think his having guts and taking real dramatic risks in the packaging that he did for Apple in the very beginning was a way that he carved out a niche for himself and differentiated himself in that congested market of agencies, because to a certain extent, we're all doing the same thing and saying the same thing, except we just brand it differently in terms of what our processes are called.
Great. I hope everyone is enjoying the session. But before we take the same question to other panelists as well, I would like to give a quick shout out to Designhill for organizing this session. Let's take a quick break and keep this interesting session going on.
Super. Did you want me to take the same question?
Yes, Matt, we will come to you. But before we give a shout out to Designhill, we'll be right back. It will take 30 seconds for us to give a shout out to Designhill. Yeah.
All right.
Robin, can you hear me? My team member is in the background who is playing all the videos right now. All right. I don't think if you can hear me.
I've always been creative and always been an artist. As a young girl, I used to paint rocks and I used to sell them for a quarter on the street. And I just fell in love with it. It just grew into a passion of mine. I started looking on the web and I came across Designhill, and they had a design contest to design a logo, and I entered it and I won. And I was like, oh, this is really great. I can pick and choose what type of logos or design projects I want to work on. And it allows me to be creative, keep my hands, with my tools and working. So it's kind of nice. It's really easy to use. You can scroll through the projects and there's sections that you could go by. It's really easy. There's a few clients who have come back to use the one-on-one projects. There's one client in particular, she owns a vintage shop, and I designed her logo, and she came back. She needed a design for a flyer, and she really liked the illustrations that I did for her, so she came back a couple of times with projects. I would recommend it, especially if you're a designer that's starting out and you want to learn from other designers, seasoned designers. It's a place to keep in the game and keep using your tools. It makes me feel great, and it kind of confirms that I should be doing this. And I love to see logos that I've designed out and proud of that. And I think that the clients are so happy that their logo represents what they do and makes them look good. It's a collaboration. It's good for me, and it's definitely good for them.
All right, that was a quick testimonial from one of the designers of Designhill, Carol Young, and we are back with the session. So let's continue with the same question that I asked Philip about how to, make a brand stand out. Matt, let me take the same question to you. Please add on your opinions on that.
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of the problems that brands have are that they look at themselves from their own perspective, right? So the leadership team gets around and it thinks about facts and figures and spreadsheets and where they want to go and what money they want to make, basically. And I think that's a fatal flaw. What we have to start to do is put ourselves in the shoes of the customer. That, for me, is the number one principle of brand from a strategic perspective. And I think when you do that, what you actually find is sometimes your competition that you might have assumed to be your market competition because of the market segment that you're in, the type of company that you are, the turnover that you have, whatever that might be, they might not actually be your true competition, right? So if you put yourself in the shoes of the customer, what you're looking at is what is their desire? What are they trying to achieve? What's their problem? And then you need to listen to what they're saying. Where are they going? What options do they see in front of them? Now that's your competition. And then from there, you need to think about, well, are we different to those options? And if we are different, why are they going to choose us over the competition? And you see, that's where brand and brand thinking gets a lot wider than just your logo design, right? As Steph says, I agree, logos are overrated. Forgive me, I know I'm probably talking to a lot of designers. They are important, but they are not the be all and end all of everything to do with the brand. The experiences that you create for your customer, I would say, is far more important. The reality of what you actually do for a customer. And you can always be improving that. And you can always be looking at making sure you're different to the other options they have around them so that they will choose you and possibly even pay more because they see more value in what you do to help them with their goal or problem.
Great. So there's a question in the chat section by Ross. I see Sunny have answered it, but I think it would be helpful, Sunny, if everyone in the community or in the audience can listen to it. The question is, and it is a very important question, I feel, how does a business start defining a brand tone of voice for content? Is there anything a brand should focus on in terms of language?
Yes. Are you asking me that question?
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, tone of voice is incredibly important to every brand and organization. And the reason is it's just as important to know what you are and what you are not, and how that then gets reflected in your language, including the vocabulary that you choose. So in the chat, the example that I was using is take a look at something like Harry's and Dollar Shave Club, right? Two brands that sell something very similar to one another, but sell them in very different ways and use brand tone of voice to really communicate to that audience. Another example would be like Lens Crafters or Warby Parker, right? Very, very different experiences, both in the store setting, the experience setting, and also the way that they communicate with language. So language is like one of the most powerful tools that you can have as a brand, because it allows you to kind of put that stake in the ground, really define the sound and the personality that you are trying to communicate, so that your audience has a feeling. They may not be able to articulate what that feeling is, but you know as a brand that you're actually dictating that, kind of like a magician with a wand. You're using that to drive the impression and the feeling that you want them to have. A great tool for uncovering that is, archetyping. Brand archetyping has been around for as long as I can remember. We've been using it. I know a lot of people on this panel use it in their workshops and tools. It's one thing that you can kind of look through the lens of the 12 archetypes and define. For example, if you understand that your brand is rebellious, right, or you're a rebel brand, it would then lead you to believe that you can use some of that rebellious language to kind of define some of the parameters and guardrails around your own brand and brand voice. Another example would be if you are a lover archetype, you might think of a brand like Victoria's Secret, who oozes this idea of a lover brand, right? And every experience that you have with them is driven by that, trying to bring that personality to life. So that is kind of what I would suggest. And most importantly is try to also, once you understand what those vocabulary guardrails are and the personality is that you want to communicate, actually put that into some kind of tone of voice guidelines and documentation, so that when you're writing on behalf of the brand, both on social, your website, your blogs, your communication, that you're driving back to those tone of voice guardrails and personality, so that you get the tone right all the way through.
Wonderful. So, Lisa, the next question that we have is, again, a lot of people had the same question, and it is about building that agility in the brands, right? So, can you throw some light on how to keep that agility in startup while working on the brand foundations? Lisa, this question is to you.
So I think in terms of like, you mean how you evolve the brand or whatever, or you keep it consistent? Well, definitely from working with a strategist or someone, you'll develop a tone of voice, a guideline, and tone of voice, like Sunny said, it's just critical. People underestimate the power of words and the way that you talk and the way that you address across multiple platforms. We're starting to kind of see brand across all sorts of digital platforms, as well as kind of not just your logo or anything or what you stand for. So I think consistency. And also being able to adapt and evolve it. It goes back to everything you build in your brand platform in terms of your archetype, your core values, and the way that you speak. I think you've got to keep referring back to the who, the what, and the why, and then not let it divert. We see a lot of our clients that we work with that have kind of gone off and done their own thing after so long. You build a brand strategy, but if you don't consistently check in and work with your experts or your team along the way, it can kind of go a bit wayward. And so I think having something to keep referring back to keep reminding yourself who you are, is critical for all brands, especially the small ones and the startups. Because there's kind of in that agile strategy, there's that tendency to kind of go off and go, quick, we need to keep doing social, or we need to keep pushing it through different marketing streams, without actually kind of doing the due diligence and going back to kind of why you exist and that kind of strategy from the start.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lisa. Steph, would you like to add to that? How should brands maintain that agility while making any strategy or laying the brand foundation?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's this idea, I think, of having feedback loops. It's the idea of making sure you put something out there, because of course you need to start somewhere, and you're always going to be a little bit wrong. There's always assumptions when you start a brand or even when you grow a brand. And at a certain point, you need to have conversations. You need to observe how people actually interact, buy, and what they think about your brand. And once you have those elements, you start building on top of that. So I think that's a big problem a lot of people have. They think like a brand strategy is something very static, While in reality, it's something where you continue to work on. And that's also a bit of a problem, of course, when you are hired to do a one-off project versus in-house. And that's why, for example, for me, it's very important when I'm doing brand strategy with a client, I really try to get the whole organization like infused with the brand strategy. I try to get everybody excited, get everybody on board, because they are the ones that are going to have to work and live with it, but also they're going to have to make choices when you're not around. So I think that's very important. If you want to do brand strategy for clients, is make sure you really help them in a way they can work with it on the long term, and that they can that there's openness in the strategy. Because really, it's the same with visual identity. If you create brand guidelines that say like you can't move this typography for more than 2 pixels to the left and to the right, that's not gonna work in the reality. In the reality, there's gonna be teams and people working with your brand identity, and you need to give them some openness to create new stuff, because they have to do it day in and day out with your material. So I think that's very important. Keep things open, make sure you have enough feedback loops, and listen to what's happening with your brand and react upon that.
Thank you, Steph. Matt, let me take this question to you. Before that, audience, we have 15 more minutes left for the session, and we will try to cover up all the questions that you have in the question section. So don't worry about that. We'll be right back with all the questions and answers. So, Steph, this question is for you. How do you think COVID-19 has changed the way brands speak to their audience?
Is that for me?
It's for Matt. Sorry.
Oh, yep, no, that's fine. So ask that question again. Sorry.
Okay. So the question was, how do you think COVID-19 has changed the way brands speak to their audience?
Sure. Okay. Well, I think the most obvious one, right, is that face-to-face is very tricky. You know, it's in a B2B space, particularly if you think about the whole events industry and how basically that's shut down. There is no events. You know, networking from a business to business environment is so important, because you get to meet the people behind the businesses that you're going to do business with. So what I found is, just in regards to that, is that I found a lot of my clients are looking at trying to create engaging online events, which is quite challenging, right? Because, you know, people are stuck on Zoom all day as it is. So, you know, we have to find ways of connecting with people that they want to be part of, say, an online event. And there's a number of ways that you can do that, you know, but I think that's one of perhaps the obvious, but the one that I'll kick off with. You know, events and connecting with people physically is completely changed, and brands really need to take it seriously as to how they get that level of engagement virtually.
All right, Philip, would you like to add to that? What do you think? What has changed in branding post-COVID? You gotta unmute yourself.
There we go. Sorry.
Yeah.
Brands always really have to pay attention to what is happening in society. What is the overarching societal trend? What is the psychological underpinning of what's happening in people's minds? And I think that COVID has caused an incredible amount of anxiety. People are very raw. People are stuck at home with their kids, and they're trying to school kids for 30 hours a day and work a 40-hour, week job. And so I think that brands now more than ever have to be incredibly hooked into the emotional state of their consumer. Their particular consumer avatar may live a certain kind of life. It may be a housewife with kids. It may be a male executive. Whatever that avatar is, they have to kind of key into what their emotional state is, where they are right now. And they have to play to that. They have to be they have to relook at their level of empathy for the problem that person has now, because COVID has changed all of our lives so dramatically that all of our problems have changed. There is this added layer of COVID and what that's brought to our lives on top of whatever it is, that problem that we've been trying to solve for people as a brand. So I think that paying really, really close attention to where society is psychologically, because that ebbs and flows. That's changed dramatically. I mean, I would even say that in the last week, because of, the political upheaval and sedition that we've had in the United States, attack on our capital, that has changed the psychological structure of every single American consumer. And we're approaching our lives in a very different way, really, within the last week. So I think that brands being keyed into and having their antenna up about the psychological state of their consumers is critical.
Thank you, Philip. Sunny, let me take this question to you. So the question is, which is asked by the audience, when do you consider to introduce or propose the branding development process in a business life cycle?
Yeah, well, I think the thing that you have to never underestimate is that you're building a brand from the moment that it's born and the moment that you start asking people to support you. What a lot of times we see with even some of our clients, sometimes they think about brand too late. They focus all of their efforts on product development and they think about brand too late into the game, and then they can't figure out why they can't make all the pieces come together. We usually advocate for, if they are like pre-seed startups or something along that line where maybe they're self-funded. We have at Motto, we have a series of like workbooks and things like that for foundational brand exercises for a nominal amount that you can kind of invest in. And I think, Philip, you have one as well. Matt, I think you have one. Maybe the whole panel has some of these types of tools, right? But our type of client is probably going to be already funded and venture backed and really invest in brand significantly, because they understand that it's the key to their survival. For companies that are getting traction and probably around 250,000, it's time to really get serious about brand, start to invest in that outside help, but there are other tools like Designhill and 99 Designs and things like that, where you can, invest a certain amount of money and probably get some initial concepts and ideas out. But I would not bank on that as if you're thinking about brand, to set your brand up holistically, like the rest of the panel was kind of talking about. Now, if you're a startup and you're funded at the $1 million level and you haven't made a serious investment in branding, then you should sincerely consider bringing a team like one of us on the panel here on to really help you define that brand, really solidify that brand, polish that brand in the market, and really use it to evolve your growth and transition, if that makes sense. But the key here is just to never underestimate the power of a brand to actually solidify you in the market, because without it, you really have nothing. I mean, without brand is so fundamental and critical, especially now with everybody talking about what COVID has done to so many businesses. Brand becomes extremely important. Pivoting becomes extremely important. Investing, putting any money that you have back into the business is so crucial to your success.
All right. Thank you so much, Sunny, for that answer. Lisa, let me ask this question to you. How risky is it to implement a rebranding program and how to go about it?
So I think in terms of, like, I've spoken a bit actually on Matt's podcast, we spoke a lot about bravery and kind of risk. And I think if you're thinking about it, it's not a risk. You're already kind of in the process of knowing you need to move forward. And if you know you need to make a change, then there isn't really a risk involved. It's more of a bravery to kind of just go at it. A bit Philip mentioned before about sitting there in the middle ground in a sea of clutter. So already, if you've got the question of should I change, should I adapt, should I evolve, you're already in a kind of a system of I'm stuck in the clutter. So I don't think there is a risk in embarking on a proper brand strategy. It can differentiate you and it can take you to a level you never thought possible, especially if you work with the right people, be it an agency or be it an independent. So personally, I don't think it's a risk. It's more of a must-have.
All right. Steph, your opinion on that question?
Yeah, I don't think I really agree on the fact that there is no risk. I think, Lisa, you're looking at it from like the internal organization, and I get that. I think that's true. But there is, of course, business risk involved in the sense that we've seen rebrands going wrong. Tropicana is a very known example where they redid the packaging and they lost, I think, 20% in sales, which is millions for a brand like Tropicana. So there's definitely some risks involved. And I think the biggest risk is probably that we underestimate how important familiarity is when it comes to branding, meaning people, when they're walking like through an aisle, they're lazy and they don't pay attention to what's happening. So when they don't recognize your brand like quickly and instantly, they might just pick another brand. And I think that's something very important we need to realize, that you just can't throw away everything from a brand and just do something else because you like it and because it looks good. And like the Burger King rebrand, I don't know if people saw it, but I think it's a great example of a very good rebrand because it looks super fresh, it looks very authentic, it looks a little bit retro. But actually, people still recognize the whole Burger King thing because actually they took a logo from way back and they just reused it. But it's a really smart way of rebranding. So I would always say, like, do account for what's already existing. Again, in the people's mind, like, what do consumers already know about the brand? And don't just throw that away. But I think, like, what you're saying, Lisa, was more about just if you want to go for it, you need to go for it. And I do think there's truth in that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Steph. So Matt has just raised a question in the section, which is about what are the key steps or principle in humanizing a brand. So Matt, would you like to answer that question?
Do you know what? I accidentally pressed the button, but I'll take it anyway. Like
Okay.
I was like, oh, what does that button do? And I pressed it, and then I'm like, oh, Matt's answering it live. So what was the question again? What are the key steps in humanizing a brand? Okay, so Sunny's touched on one, and which is the archetypes. I find archetypes a very powerful tool, not necessarily, because you'd go out to customers with it as a thing, but just in terms of internal alignment. So, the questions I mentioned earlier, like why do we exist? Who do we exist to serve? Why should they choose us? How should we show up? Archetypes help you think about your brand as if it's a character in the customer's story. And so if you can think about the customer almost like the hero of the story, like where are they going? What's their problem? What's their challenge? You're going to show up in their story. How are you going to show up? If you show up incorrectly and you don't kind of show up in a way that they can connect with, you're not going to, have that response that you desire. And that, as I say, it's all encompassing with all the experiences, with the innovation that you have, your products, your services, all of that, and your design. All of it links together. So that's one way I would suggest you begin to do it. It sounds super easy, but it can take a lot of work and a lot of effort to figure out where and how customers need you to show up, and then align around exactly what that means for all of your teams.
Thanks, Matt. Philip, your take on the same question. How should a brand humanize themselves? You gotta unmute yourself again.
Sorry, yeah. I think that the more brands understand who their consumer is and what their consumer wants, then they can humanize themselves to align to be the kind of human brand that their consumers want them to be. And I'll give an example. I was working with a company that does travel deals. They do email travel deals. And one of the preconceptions they had about their customers were that their customers really cared mostly about price, that they were price driven. They were just looking for the lowest airfare to wherever they wanted to go. And we did some consumer research for them and did a lot of quantitative and qualitative interviews with their consumers, and found out that actually the majority of their consumers really loved the emails because it helped them dream. They were looking for an emotional kind of lift, something that they could fantasize about. Lots of them weren't even going to take advantage of the deals, the flight deals, but they were looking for ideas of where they could go in the world, what they could do, what that next adventure they could take is. And so by doing that consumer research with this company, we realized what was the human motivation behind them actually subscribing to the Travel Deals newsletter. And it was amazingly eye-opening for the company. And it, to Sunny's statement, it completely changed how they handled their brand tone of voice and how they spoke in social media, how they communicated, because they started communicating on a much more emotional, kind of aspirational level than one that was just based on deals. So I think that's one of the aspects that they have to pay really close attention to when you're humanizing your own brand is who are the humans? what is the, what's the archetype of your consumer avatar? Because you have to relate directly with them.
Thank you so much, Philip. That makes a lot of sense. So let's take the last question of the session. We are short on time, and I see we have that there are few questions by the audience as well. So let me take the last question of the session, and Sunny, let me take this question to you. Let's talk about ROI. Businesses are investing a lot of time and efforts in building a brand, strategizing, and laying the foundation. So when it comes to ROI from it, how to measure the ROI from branding? Sunny, would you like to answer that question?
Keep muting and unmuting myself.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the question was, how do you what? Ask me that
How
again.
do you measure the ROI from branding?
Well, it's really a tricky question. I mean, I think that there are ways that you can measure a brand, but I also think that there is this idea of how do you measure ROI in terms of branding being a labor of love. So sometimes you can measure brand through e-commerce sales, right? Like, do we know our brand is working or not working through conversions? You can look at it as simple as that, or you can also look at other things that have ROI, such as, does our team feel more aligned and that we're marching in the same direction? Do we believe that we are culturally and fundamentally aligned as a brand, and we are all confident in the way that we're moving forward? Can we also look at the tiny impressions and marks that we're leaving in the market over time, and how is that either supporting or undermining our brand in the marketplace? So there's a lot of ROI that is seen and also unseen. So I think branding is a sort of labor of love, that it's not a one and done, but it's a thing that happens over time, and ROI distributes itself and sort of defines itself through various methods of sort of qualification or looking at it in terms of, like, are we successful or not successful? Like, there's so many things that either support that or undermine it that are very hard to put into context, but I think that there's certainly measures in terms of financials, looking at, retention, looking at things like conversion, looking at sales, all those sort of things can measure up to whether or not, and why companies often come back to us for a perhaps rebrand, or come to us for a rebrand, is because something in that pie chart isn't working, right? Or something in their data or statistics are leaning them towards this idea that something in the brand is weak. But a lot of times what we find is it's not just a sales thing or a conversion thing. It's often a bigger, more holistic picture of what's actually happening behind the organization that's affecting how the brand is resonating both internally and externally. And that's ultimately affecting the larger ROI of how they're doing in the marketplace. So I don't think it's just one thing. I think it's everything that you have to look at when it comes to, is my brand, am I getting ROI from my brand per se? I think it's a much, much bigger question that you have to ask. And I'm sure everyone here on the panel will have some differing points of views on this, but that's my take on it.
Thank you so much, Sunny. Let me take the opinion from other panelists as well on the same question. Any other panelists who would like to share their opinions? How to measure the ROI from branding? This is an open question to everyone now. I'm not taking names.
I'll dive in quickly. I
Okay.
think one thing that's interesting here for the people to look for is Les Binet and Peter Field have some really good research about this. The idea of brand building and how it affects a brand's sales. And there's some really interesting research done there. The biggest problem is, and I think that's really on topic with today about Agile, is that most marketing metrics are short-term metrics, things that are measured on a weekly or monthly basis. While it's proven that, for example, for a brand campaign or an awareness campaign, these things are only affected, let's say, on a 6-month or even a year or 2-year basis. So if you are measuring on a very short term, you're usually not picking up on things that are very long term. And there's this really interesting rule, which is the 60-40 rule, again, by the research by Les Binet, that says you need to invest 60% of your marketing budget in brand building and 40% in activation being more salesy stuff, like buy this stuff now, get a secret coupon code, that sort of stuff. That's activation. But you also need to be brand building. I think that's something that's shown, like the ROI is shown in science, on sales, on all these things. But you need a very long-term approach, and that's where things are a little bit tricky with these like short-term marketing metrics.
Thank you, Steph. Any other panelists who would like to add on their opinions on the same question?
Yeah, I was going to just add that there is, in terms of when you value a business, there are now factors which include intangible assets, brand being one of them, right? So, you know, how that's calculated is very complex, and the finance people, you know, are the best ones to answer that, frankly. But all I would say is that what is the flip side? That we don't manage meaning, that we don't design how we approach, how we appear, how we show up, you know, the experiences that we produce for customers. What's the return on investment of basically your competition smashing you out the water, right? That's basically what we're talking about here. And so I would say it's not even that question is kind of like a limiting question. And for me, branding should be at the center of is at the center of every single business. The question is are they doing it deliberately and meaningfully, or are they just leaving it to pure chance? And so it's not a question of a return on investment for an activity. Brand is your business. It's the way you manage your meaning. And so for me, think longer term than next week's metric. And when your business eventually closes down in 100 years' time, you can tell me the return on the investment.
Thank you, Matt. So, Philip, you want to add?
Well, I was just going to add in that I think that when it comes to measuring anything with a brand, there's two measures, right? There's qualitative and quantitative. You can either measure the money and the numbers and the traffic and the lift, or you can measure the feelings and the emotions and the memory and the recall of your consumers. And I think that a lot of times when you talk about ROI of branding or brand with companies or who are hiring you to do that sort of work, they immediately go to quantitative metrics around marketing, sales, form fills, calls, all that sort of stuff, leads, revenue. But I think that what we need to bring back to the table is that there are things that are like recall and how people recognize a brand and how quickly they understand it or see it or how they resonate with the brand voice. All of those things are also quantifiable in testing around consumer research. And so we have to bring to the table the fact that there are both of those levels of measuring ROI and offering those up to our clients, because they have to understand that both of those things need to be taken into consideration, because some are soft metrics and some are hard metrics.
Thank you, Philip. So, all right, I see a lot of question has already been answered during the session as well. So there's this one question which I think has not been answered, and I'll take that. And this is the last question of the session. So Karni is asking, and the question is for Sunny, how important is aligning your personal why to your brand purpose? Any ways to go about doing this?
That's a great question. So when we're working with leaders, a lot of times, one of the things that we try to, specifically leaders who don't know their why, right? Or are struggling with articulation. Everyone that is coming to us most of the time, and probably most of the people that are on this panel as well, is they're struggling with the lack of language, right? They're trying to define something, a purpose, a cause, and they're trying to give language to it that's somehow meaningful. And it's not just meaningful to them, but it's also meaningful because the person at the helm is often the beacon and the embodiment of that why, right? The visionary that starts the company is often the embodiment of the why of why they started the company in the first place. What happens to organizations over time is as they grow and they scale and they become bigger, a lot of times there's a divergent that happens where that why that the company began with starts to get fractured little by little, or it starts to chip away, or it starts to get other interpretations made of it. And then over time, the culture and the team begin to lose sight of, well, what do we do here? Why do we do this? And it often resides with the visionary at the helm. So it's really important to not only evaluate why you're doing what you're doing and why that's being brought into the company and why that gets crystallized into the larger purpose, but also how that gets distilled down through the rest of the team and the organization so that we all are marching in the same direction. We all understand exactly what it is that we're fighting for. So, but can a person's why often be different than the company's why? I've seen that situation a few different times. And what I find is that it leads to a tremendous amount of confusion, because when the organization is sort of driven by its own sort of vehicle, who is the person? There's always somebody that's the seed of that bigger idea and the reason that that business exists in the first place. So making sure that those two things are aligned are extremely important, at least in my experience, and when they're not aligned or they become disaligned, you find that there are people who are clocking in and clocking out, but they don't exactly understand why they're in the business in the first place, or they're just they don't feel like they belong to anything. And that's why it's so important to operationalize that purpose at every level so that you can make sure that everyone is clear on not only the vision of the future that you hope to create, but what is the purpose of why they're even coming to work for you in the first place, and making sure that whether that visionary is still in the company or not, that embodiment is extremely important. So a great example of this is Sam Walton from Walmart. A lot of people still in the Walmart organization still ask the question, what would Sam do? His ghost is still in the halls. He still wanders the halls. And the same is true for Ace Hotels. If you look at the founder of Ace Hotels, who now is no longer with us, but if you think about his purpose and his reason for being, it's still driven throughout the organization. They're still looking to Alex Calderwell in some crazy way to drive what that spirit of the organization is. You have to embody that and keep it within the walls of the organization and also extend it out to your audience, because otherwise, what's the purpose of doing this in the first place, right? You're just in it to make money, and you're in it to have a business, which you want, but you want purpose to be very much a part of why your organization exists, and whoever that lives with it should live within everyone in the organization, not just one person.
Thank you so much, Sunny, for answering that question wonderfully. Karni, I hope you got the answer of your question. Sunny has explained it. So that was the last question of the session, and that brings us to the end of this wonderful discussion with our panelists. Although we could have covered a lot more questions here, but unfortunately we have limited time. Once again, I would like to thank Lisa, Steph, Philip, Matt, and Sunny for taking out the time to be a part of this event. Any last thing, guys, that you would like to say to the audience before I wrap up? It's an open question to everyone again.
Yeah, manage your meaning. Don't focus too far on the logo. Think bigger. And once you've thought bigger, think bigger again.
All right. Anyone else?
Own who you are in a world that wants to own you.
Steph?
Sure. My motto is solve bigger problems. So kind of the same idea, right?
Philip?
My motto is dare to suck. You got to get out there and you have to take chances. You have to be bold. You have to take a stand. And like I said, if you stand in the middle of the road, you're going to get run over.
Thank you. Lisa?
Mine is just be bold, be brave, but be you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much once again, guys, for joining us. Really appreciate the time that you have invested. And thank you so much to all the audience as well who stayed with us till the end. 80 people are still here. And I really appreciate the fact that, you guys are enjoying the session and asking questions. So, all right, this is not where it ends. We have a lot more events lined up for you in the coming days. The next event is going to be about introduction to branding from definition to design. And it's going to be a workshop. So if you have not registered yet, my colleague Robin would be sharing links in the chat section wherein you can register. If you have joined us late in the session, the recording of this event is going to be available to you after the session as well. And it will be uploaded on YouTube as well. So you can check out the previous webinars on our YouTube channel as well and get the recording of this event as well. Also, if you would like to stay updated with events like these, you can follow us on our Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter platform. The links will again be in the chat section. And make sure to follow all our panelists as well, so that you can, you can stay up to date with respect to branding and what's going on in the industry. So on that note, I would like to thank everybody again for joining us. For all the business owners who are listening to this and wish to source high quality designs and build your brand, visit designhill.com. On that note, I would like to say goodbye to everyone. Stay safe, stay happy. Thank you so much for joining us. See you soon. Bye-bye.